Ebchester, County Durham. Andrew Atkinson is 9 and suffers from a rare, incurable blood disease called Hemophilia. His blood won't clot naturally. It lacks the vital clotting agent known as factor VIII.
Do it very slowly, Mom.
Andrew is a severe haemophiliac. He frequently bleeds internally into muscles and joints, particularly his ankles. The only way he can stop painful bleeds and prevent permanent crippling is to immediately inject himself with factor VIII. For Andrew and an increasing number of Britain's 3,000 haemophiliacs, this means a special concentrated form of American factor VIII called Hemofil.
Can you move your hand? I'll be able to do it now.
Hemofil is made from thousands of donations of human blood plasma, the straw-coloured liquid that carries red and white cells through the veins.
That's another hit, Mom.
It's the wrong one.
Hemofil and other factor VIII concentrates have revolutionized the lives of many haemophiliacs. Before Hemofil, Neil Robinson used a British factor VIII product called cryoprecipitate, but he had to be treated in hospital. In 1 year alone, he made 98 visits to hospital and was off school for 3 months. Hemofil's easier to handle and treats a bleed immediately.
That's it.
Well, we are starting to lead our lives, which I think, and this is what life is all about. We're starting to live. Before, it was living between hospital and home. I wouldn't call that living. But we are living as a family now, and I think this is very important.
What sort of things are you doing now that you have never done before?
Going on holiday.
Well, going on holiday to start with. This is one important factor. We did try holidays in the past, and I'm afraid they weren't very successful.
For Andrew Atkinson and his family, it has also meant a more normal life.
To us, it's made a terrific difference. Pure and simply because if we want to go anywhere, we can take it with us. It's much easier to give. We give it ourselves. He gives it himself as well now.
To watch him do it himself, I think it's a great thing when you're just 9-year-old. I think he's doing something that I couldn't do at 9-year-old. I think it takes a lot of courage.
But products like Hemofil, as its makers admit, also carry a high risk of transmitting hepatitis, a painful, debilitating liver disease. Some haemophiliacs are immune to this risk because they have had hepatitis due to their many transfusions, but many are not. Even more disturbing, new evidence from 3 American studies links concentrates with subsequent liver damage. Professor Ari Zuckerman of London University is a world authority on hepatitis.
Well, hepatitis or jaundice is a particularly interesting infection because the severity of the illness ranges from a very mild form of infection, perhaps with trivial symptoms, to an attack of jaundice with quite a lot of disability, which may last for some weeks or perhaps even months. And it is associated with a significant death rate. In addition, in a number of cases, it may progress to chronic liver damage and may end up in a condition such as chronic active hepatitis or cirrhosis of the liver. So that it really is potentially quite a serious disease.
Hemofil was first imported 2 years ago because the blood transfusion service couldn't meet demands for more concentrates. Now, for the first time, British haemophiliacs have discovered this high risk. Since April 1974, there's been an unprecedented outbreak of hepatitis among haemophiliacs. Nearly 60 cases have been traced so far, including 2 which may have contributed to the deaths of those haemophiliacs. The man who discovered the hepatitis outbreak is Dr. John Crask, consultant virologist at a Manchester hospital.
Checking amongst the instance of hepatitis in the local population showed that there was no abnormal instance of hepatitis in the local community or amongst the relatives of the patients affected. And it seemed, therefore, that the most likely thing was the introduction of some new product or something else associated with their treatment. We therefore checked the transfusion histories of these patients, and it became apparent that this jaundice was associated with the administration of one particular batch of a commercial concentrate of anti-hemophilic factor called Hemofil, which had been introduced for use for the first time at the end of 1973. So far, the evidence would suggest that 58 cases of hepatitis in all have been found.
Keith Proud is one of the worst cases reported to Dr. Crask. For the last 2 years, he's been treating himself at home in Gateshead with Hemofil. A year ago, he caught hepatitis.
It started off with backache, things like that, feeling pretty rotten. A couple of days after that, I had started to turn yellow. The whites of my eyes went yellow. Started vomiting. And generally feeling pretty rough. I couldn't eat anything. I was only drinking fluids.
Keith Proud's case, like all the others and the 2 deaths, has been linked with the use of this product, Hemofil. So World in Action decided to go to America where it's made, to discover why the hepatitis outbreak has occurred and just how great a risk to health Hemofil is.
In the valley, it's now 75 degrees in Orange County and downtown Los Angeles, 70, currently in Hollywood, 60.
Unlike Britain, where blood is given voluntarily, in America, plasma is bought. Much of it is bought from men who need money badly, like those down here on the skid rows of America's big cities. But paid donors carry 6 to 13 times the risk of having hepatitis as volunteer donors, and they can pass it on. To discover why, a World in Action investigator spent 4 weeks visiting plasma centers, selling plasma, talking to donors, and examining safeguards. Tonight, World in Action investigates the health risk to Britain's Hemophiliacs from the men who sell their blood in America. Blood and plasma products like Factor VIII are big business in America. This is Costa Mesa, California, south of Los Angeles. Here is the headquarters of the Highland division of Travenol, a subsidiary of Baxter Laboratories, a leading US drug company and the makers of Hemofil. The company buys plasma in 13 American states and Puerto Rico. We asked them if we could film inside one of their plasma centers. They refused. One reason, unattractive outside situations and unattractive donors. We therefore decided to investigate for ourselves, starting here in Baltimore on America's East Coast. This is East Baltimore Street, the city's skid row. This area with its bars, sex shops and peep shows is home to many Baltimore alcoholics and down and outs. Here we found the Highland Donor Center. It is 6 a.m. and the temperature is near freezing. The plasma center does not open until 7:30, but the queue of donors starts to form well before then. Many of these men are out of work. Plasma centers are booming because of the current recession. Unemployment is highest among the black population, who make up a large proportion of plasma donors. Government rules say any donor under the influence of alcohol is unsuitable, and centers tell donors not to drink 24 hours before selling plasma. But many we saw did just that. Donors are allowed to sell half a litre of plasma twice a week. They usually get £2.50 for the first half litre and £5 for the second. When the donors left, none of them would agree to be filmed. We decided to continue our investigations in another part of America. Baton Rouge, Louisiana, in the deep south. Across the road from the Salvation Army in a rundown part of town, we found another Highland Plasma Center. Once again, the queue, many of them unemployed, had formed well before the center opened at 8 a.m. The nurse in charge refused to let us film inside. However, we were able to get some scenes of what happens in a plasma center. Plasma is collected by an hour-long process called plasmapheresis. A litre of blood is taken from the donor. This is then spun in a centrifuge and the red cells separated out and returned to the donor. Highland is left with about half a litre of plasma. From 2,000 to 6,000 litres are then pooled and concentrated factor VIII extracted. Hepatitis thrives in unhygienic living conditions such as those often found in warmer southern states like Louisiana. As well as by injection, it's passed on by close personal contact and contaminated food. To assess the health risk from US-paid donors to Hemophiliacs in Britain, World in Action invited Professor Ari Zuckerman, a leading British hepatitis expert, to join us. We took him to California, where Highland has 6 plasma centers. California has more cases of hepatitis than any other state.
Well, it's been recognized for a number of years now that bought blood does carry a higher risk. And it's difficult to actually pinpoint the reason, but it seems that individuals who are willing to sell their blood are normally from a background which appears to be rather poor socioeconomically. In the past, many of them were alcoholics, and indeed a well-known dictum which originated in the United States was ooze for booze. This has recently been replaced by perhaps a more serious element, namely drug addicts.
5 a.m. the next morning, Professor Zuckerman visits the Highland Center at San Jose, 50 miles south of San Francisco. Once again, we find ourselves among men at the bottom of American society. But for the first time, we find a donor who is prepared to talk to us. His name is Gary.
Why did you come down?
I need the money.
Do you have a job?
No,
Why not?
because I can't get employment. I'm on parole.
How much do I get paid? $8. It's my $8 day.
Pardon me?
Do the questions that they ask you in there before you give plasma, do you always answer them truthfully?
Are you going to tell them?
No.
No, you know. Yeah, most of the time. Yeah.
But what sort of questions wouldn't you answer truthfully?
Well, they ask you stuff like, if you've been drinking and stuff like that, the night before. If you've been eating right and all that crap, And I'm a big fat dude, so it don't matter if I've been eating right or not. I'm healthy,
Morning, darling. Shove it. Shove it. Grab it.
Questioning about a donor's medical history is important in keeping out unsuitable donors. But from talking to donors, World in Action found that it is not unusual for them to lie about their health.
I know what you're doing. I didn't think I did. I'm the same way. Pardon me while I puke.
By offering to sell plasma in 5 Highland centres, we established even more disturbing facts. 1. No check was made on the false addresses we gave. This can admit down and outs, a high hepatitis risk. 2. Highland doctors did not always carry out the only checks that can detect drug users. Drug users are among the highest risk for hepatitis. 3. Physical examinations were not always done fully, though certified as such. 4. Certain medical questions were not asked, but were filled in as having been answered satisfactorily. The Bureau of Biologics, which controls plasma centres, has also criticised Highland. Since November last year, the company has been warned 13 times for breaking federal regulations at its plasma centres and processing plants. Last year, the Bureau temporarily closed 1 centre. We were asked to stop filming inside the San Jose Centre, but we left Professor Zuckerman inside to observe the donors and what happened to them. While we waited for him, we asked another regular plasma donor, an out-of-work labourer, whether down and outs sold plasma.
Well, mostly it was sometimes, yeah. It's like you're going to the street down and you're broke, got no place to stay. That's the first place you go to. Blood bank. Because otherwise, the guy doesn't know where to do. He's going to look for a blood bank.
Do you know alcoholics who give their blood?
Mostly are alcoholics.
Do you know drug addicts who give their blood?
No, I don't think they'll accept it.
But they accept alcoholics?
Certainly. See, the alcohol, like wine or whiskey, whatever it is, it brings your blood up, puts iron in your blood.
Later, we asked Professor Zuckerman what he thought of the donors he'd seen.
One of the strongest impressions that I obtained is the type of donor that was presenting himself at this center. I was somewhat surprised to see that a number of individuals were clearly malnourished, and obviously these are individuals who should not donate blood, and particularly should not have protein removed from their circulation. Another type of person that was presenting himself at the center was the vagabond type, individuals who have just come off buses, people who were ill-camped, 1 or 2 persons who one would probably regard as drug users.
How many of the people that you saw presenting themselves here today would be accepted by the blood transfusion service in England?
Well, this is my own judgment as a physician, would be that most of them would have been rejected straight away.
Professor Zuckerman then took us to meet America's leading campaigner against the paid donor system, Dr. J. Garrett Allen, professor of surgery at Stanford University.
Won't you come on in? Thank you.
The 2 men discussed Dr. Allen's work on the hepatitis risk from paid donors and the recently discovered extra risk of liver damage from using concentrates. Afterwards, we talked to Dr. Allen.
What sort of evidence is there that shows the degree of risk that you run if you use blood taken from paid donors?
There are a number of studies that have been made in the past decade or less in which the risk runs from 6 to 70 times greater than were the donors all from a volunteer source, friends and relatives and such.
What is the reason for that?
The reason for that is that the paid donor is offered so little money that no one is willing to take time off his work to go give transfusions, and therefore most of these donors are unemployed, are transients, and live in a lifestyle that none of us would put up with.
How effective are the tests in preventing hepatitis virus getting into these pools?
We really don't know how many viruses are involved. There are at least 2 and perhaps more. The major one, Hepatitis B virus, is detected fairly well, but it appears that at least 2/3 more infectious bloods or donors will escape detection by the use of this test because the test does not apply to their virus.
We then moved to Los Angeles, where Professor Zuckerman took us to meet 2 other leading experts on the risks attached to Factor VIII concentrates, Dr. Alan Redeker and Dr. James Mosley, professors of medicine at the University of Southern California. We asked Dr. Mosley about the risks of pooling thousands of donations in order to make Hemofil.
Well, even if you have a very low carrier rate in a population, if it's 1 in 100, and you pool 100 units, that 1 is going to contaminate the other 99. If it's 1 in 1,000 and you pool them, it's going to contaminate the other 999. And particularly if there is a concentration technique which not only concentrates the factor that you're interested in, the clotting factor, but also concentrates the virus. And unfortunately, that happens to be true for the clotting factors. The virus is concentrated along with them. So even with the best donors, a large pool is a risk, and the larger the pool, the higher the risk.
What are the chances of someone catching hepatitis from using a product made from the plasma of these type of people?
If it's a blood product that cannot be sterilized, and that's true for the clotting factor concentrates, the risk is probably 100% if the individual is susceptible.
Dr. Mosley told us many British haemophiliacs could be susceptible, especially those needing few injections. They've had no experience of hepatitis or of products made from large pools of bought plasma. The Highland Donor Center in downtown Los Angeles is in the heart of the Skid Row area. The drinking of alcohol is common around plasma centers. We were told many donors drink to build up the iron in their blood to pass a test before they sell. Others believe it speeds up their circulation, enabling them to give blood faster. But for many men on Skid Row, drinking is an all-day, everyday affair. Here there is no shortage of alcoholics who, because of their lifestyle, are likely to be hepatitis carriers. To continue our investigation into the cause of the hepatitis outbreak in Britain, Professor Zuckerman visited his second Highland Donor Center. While he remained inside, we toured the neighborhood, which has no less than 5 plasma centers and blood banks. Hepatitis is a common disease in the overcrowded, poor areas of big cities like Los Angeles, but it is also a major problem throughout America. At this plasma center, near Highlands, which is owned by a major independent plasma supplier, we found one man who talked frankly about paid donors and who they are. The manager, Russell S. Tate.
What about alcoholics? Do you think that you have many people who are alcoholics that come in here?
Yes, we probably get a proportionate number. We screen them very carefully, though, and try not to let them donate.
But you still think that you have quite a few that probably get through your screening process?
Yes, I'm sure we do.
What about drug addicts?
There again, that's a possibility that runs fairly high. We try to screen them the best way we can, but it's very difficult to do that.
When in fact you examine the donors, how much do you rely on them answering truthfully the questions that the nurses ask them?
Probably about 50% of our questioning is based on their answers.
And do you think it's safe to rely on a man answering a question truthfully when if he answers the question the wrong way, he won't receive any money, which is really why he's here?
It may not be fair, but it's about the only way we can do it.
Do you think it's ethical for a company to take blood or plasma from people who are on the lowest level of society and then sell it at quite a profitable transaction?
It's American business. I don't know whether it's ethical or not, no, but up to this point in time, no one has found an acceptable substitute for human blood, so we have to get it somehow.
Back at the Highland Centre, the donors had started to come out. One of the first was Bill, an unemployed dishwasher. He said today was the 176th time he'd sold plasma.
Do you come down here if you've got a job?
No.
So you only come down here
when I'm not working.
Yeah. Have you been working for the last 3 months?
No, I've worked a couple days last week, but not really, not enough to keep going.
Where do you live?
Usually hotels. If I haven't got any not working, I stay in one of the missions here in LA.
How much does that cost you?
Hotels run about $2.25. The missions are free.
What in that case, other than if you get $15 a week, is that for you to keep enough to keep alive on?
No.
So what do you do?
Well, hope I could get work, or if I don't get the work, I'll eat at different missions throughout the rest of the week.
What do you eat at the missions?
Beans, mostly.
Nothing but beans.
Mostly beans. Other things. They have sometimes spaghetti, sometimes, varies at different missions.
Like many Skid Row donors, Bill, who is 33, spends most of his day hanging around the area. Most mornings and afternoons, he comes here, the St. Vincent Centre, known as the Misery House. This is where Skid Row down-and-outs spend their time until the missions open in the evening. Highland, like certain other companies in America making Factor VIII concentrates, relies on hundreds of bills for plasma. But for several years, the company has also bought plasma even cheaper in developing countries. There, the hepatitis risk is often greater. Buying plasma is an international business. Reportedly, Highland has bought plasma in Central America and the Caribbean, South America and Africa. The World Health Organization and the Red Cross are trying to stop the plasma traffic, but Highland still buys plasma for Hemofil outside mainland America. Baxter Laboratories, which owns Highland, has become one of America's fastest-growing drug companies. Thanks in part to Hemofil and other plasma products, since 1970, Baxter's net profits have grown from £7.17 million to £18.14 million last year. After visiting 10 of Baxter's 24 Highland plasma centers, we ended our investigation here in Deerfield, Illinois, near Chicago, at the Baxter headquarters. We put the questions it had raised to Baxter's Senior Vice President for Medical Affairs, Dr. Richard S. Wilbur.
What is your reaction to the cases of hepatitis that have occurred in England amongst haemophiliacs who have been using Hemofil?
Reported cases of hepatitis, particularly by Dr. Kraske, which appeared in Lancet last year, occurred from earlier batches which were made before we were able to use the newer techniques of screening for hepatitis B, which we now have. We were very pleased to read that the cases were all mild. I believe that the most severe case, the person was sick for something like 6 weeks. I wouldn't want anybody to have hepatitis, but when one compares the benefit to the patient of taking the Factor VIII concentrate as compared with this relatively mild disease, we feel that the risk-benefit ratio for that patient was a good one. But let me emphasize, we have improved our techniques for screening our donors for hepatitis since that date. It is much less likely that future batches will cause hepatitis. We have every intention of going ahead and getting still better techniques for screening for hepatitis.
What's your view of as a doctor, of the quality of the people that sell plasma to Highland?
As a doctor, I don't make any judgments on the quality of people. I accept them all as they are.
What is your view then, not as a doctor, of the donors?
As a human being, I'd prefer not to make that sort of value judgment on the quality of my fellow humans. I find them for what they are.
Have you visited the Highland donor centers?
Only one.
Only one?
Yes.
What did you think of the people that you saw there?
They were human beings, such as I took care of when I practiced medicine.
Can you explain to me how it is, if you're so careful in checking the people that donate plasma or sell plasma, how it is possible that I can go to a Highland donor centre and I can have a physical examination filled out in which questions are put into, to which I have supposedly answered yes, that were never put to me, and examinations are indicated to have been carried out that never were carried out?
No, I can't.
But in fact, can you explain to me why, in fact, if, for example, people are asked whether they're alcoholics, that I have been in Highland donor centres where people have been there and have donated plasma, who smelled a drink, who drank before they came in and went straight out of the donor centre and bought a bottle of wine afterwards?
And if you say so, I have no reason to disagree with you.
But I mean, would you dispute that that would happen?
I wouldn't dispute if you say it has.
But doesn't that...
What you've observed, that isn't the protocol we've set up, no.
Doesn't that strike you as disturbing, that we could actually see this?
Yes, we would prefer that all of the plasma were available from better sources. And we do not deliberately seek out as a source of plasma the unfortunate people in the country. As I said before, we would vastly prefer to have it from voluntary donors, just as everyone would like to have blood transfusions from voluntary donors.
How safe do you think paid donors are?
If we could get this factor only from voluntary donors, as you say, from the upper levels of society, we would do that. Until we can, we must get what we may.
Just getting it so I don't get on your mind.
World in Action's investigation has confirmed that Hemofil carries a high risk for 3 reasons: the use of paid donors, its production from large plasma pools, and the inadequacy of hepatitis tests. Next week, we investigate why Britain is importing Hemofil, its cost to the National Health Service, and why British pioneer work did not ensure enough of a safer, British-made concentrate.